My name's Amber Hayes. I'm 29 years old, and a year ago, I found myself standing outside my own sister's wedding reception, being told I wasn't welcome. I'd given my name to the staff. They looked confused. Sorry, your name isn't on the list. I blinked. Surely it was a mistake. My mom was nearby, so I asked her. She didn't even flinch, just smirked and said, "Did you really think you were invited?" Strangers aren't allowed. The words hit me in the gut, but I kept my face calm. I smiled through the ache in my chest. Then I'll live like a stranger, I said, and I walked away. Before I get into what happened next, drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from. If you've ever been through something similar, cutting ties with family or standing up for yourself, tap that button and hit subscribe. You're not alone. I grew up in a modest suburb just outside of Boston. We weren't wealthy, but we were stable. My dad, Richard, was an accountant. My mom, Deanna, was a part-time real estate agent and a full-time perfectionist. And then there was my older sister, Madison, 3 years ahead of me, and always the golden child. Back then, I didn't recognize it as favoritism. I thought Madison just needed more help or attention. She was the bubbly one, popular, outgoing. I was quieter, more introspective. While Madison struggled in school, I found peace in books and painting. Dad would sit with me at the dining room table, watching me sketch. "You've got a gift, Amber," he'd say. Those were the rare moments I felt seen. When I was 15, everything changed. Dad came home complaining about heartburn. He lay down to rest and never woke up. A massive heart attack took him from us without warning. At the funeral, I remember my mother's arm tightly around Madison while I stood just a few steps away, clutching my father's favorite tie. It was the only thing of his she let me keep. After Dad's death, the favoritism ramped up. Mom poured herself into Madison's world social events. Shopping sprees, college prep. I was left to navigate my grief alone. "You've always been independent," she'd say. It wasn't a compliment. It was her excuse for neglect. Still, I excelled in school. My art teacher secretly submitted my work to a regional competition, and I won. The local paper ran a story about me. Mom taped the article to the fridge but couldn't help saying, "It's nice you have your little drawings to keep you busy." Or, Madison could have been artistic too if she hadn't been so busy with friends. When I earned a full scholarship to the Rhode Island School of Design, Madison barely concealed her jealousy. At the dinner where I shared the news, she muttered, "Guess some people get all the luck." Mom jumped in with, "Wow, we all know college isn't for everyone. Madison has real-world skills. Moving out for college gave me the space to breathe." I thrived at Rist, picked up freelance work during my sophomore year, and landed a full-time gig at a boutique design agency in Boston after graduation. I built my own life. Still, I made the effort to stay connected. I called my mom every Sunday. I came home for holidays with carefully chosen gifts, only to be met with backhanded comments. "Madison's boyfriend just bought a BMW," she'd say. Or, "Madison's looking at houses in the suburbs."
The comparisons were constant.
Always unspoken, but heavy. When I was 27, I got a huge promotion. I was so proud, so excited to share the news. I called Mom. "That's nice. Honey," she said. "But Madison just got engaged. Ethan proposed last night. The ring is stunning." And just like that, the conversation was all about the wedding. Ethan came from money, and Mom was over the moon. Her daughter marrying into wealth was her personal social ladder. I told myself I was happy for Madison, but honestly, I just felt invisible again. Still, I tried to be involved. At dinner one night, I offered, "What can I do to help?" Madison glanced at me, like she'd forgotten I was there. "You're a designer, right? Maybe you can help with invitations or something." That'd save us money. I swallowed my pride and said yes. I hoped this would be a way to reconnect. Maybe if I gave my best to Madison's special day, they'd finally see me, accept me. Lendemain, the engagement lasted over a year, and the planning took over their lives. The wedding was set at a ritzy country club where Ethan's family had membership. The guest list ballooned past 200. Most were business connections, not friends. I stuck to my word and started designing. I created mood boards, fonts, color palettes, hand-illustrated floral borders. The vibe was elegant and timeless, just like Madison wanted. The invitations were only the beginning. I designed programs, menus, place cards, cocktail napkins, all of it. Thousands of dollars worth of professional work, for free. "Can you make the font fancier?" Madison would ask. Mom says the border should be gold, not silver. I made every change, never pushing back. I wanted to be helpful. I wanted to be included. One afternoon, 3 months before the wedding, I checked the wedding website I'd built and noticed something strange. Under the family section, Madison was listed with Mom and Ethan's parents. I wasn't there. I figured it was just a mistake. I called Madison. "Hey, I noticed I'm not listed on the site under family." "Oh, weird," she said. "Distracted? Probably just a mix-up."
I'll fix it.
Weeks passed. Nothing changed. Then the RSVPs started rolling in. I still hadn't gotten my invitation. I mentioned it to Mom on the phone. I know it sounds silly, I said, but I'd love to have one of the invitations just as a keepsake. She paused. Oh, Madison's handling the guest list. I'm sure she assumed you knew you were invited. Same vague response from Madison. You don't need an invitation. Amber, your family, technically, she added. That stung, but I pushed it down. Told myself it was wedding stress, 6 weeks before the big day. I finalized the seating chart and noticed something else. My name wasn't on any table. I double-checked the family tables. Nothing.
I called Madison immediately.
I'm not on the seating chart, I said. Oh, well, I figured you'd be helping coordinate. Like, you wouldn't really have time to sit and eat, right? Madison, I'm not your coordinator. I've only helped with the design stuff. Right. Well, maybe you can sit with some of my college friends or something. Despite all this, I kept going. I bought a dress that matched the wedding colors. Spent hours searching for the perfect gift. Found a beautiful vintage frame. Had it engraved with their names and the wedding date. I didn't sleep the night before. I was anxious, but hopeful. Maybe they'd finally see me. I woke up early, dressed carefully, and drove to the country club. What happened next would change everything. When I arrived at the country club 3 hours before the ceremony, the place was buzzing with activity. Florists were unloading arrangements. Caterers were setting up, photographers adjusting lighting. I took it all in while clutching my tote bag filled with extra copies of programs, emergency tools, double-sided tape, and an extra pair of shoes. My emergency kit. My final gift, inside the grand entrance hall, polished marble floors, gold accents. I approached a woman with a clipboard. Hi, I'm Amber Hayes, the bride's sister. I've been helping with all the design materials. Just checking if anything needs attention before the ceremony. The woman glanced up. Her name tag said Vanessa. She blinked. Oh, you're the designer. Madison didn't mention you'd be here in person. I'm also her sister, I said. Right, she said, clearly trying to make sense of it. Well, the printed materials are all accounted for. The mother of the bride is upstairs with the bridal party, if you need anything. Not your mother. Just the mother of the bride. I climbed the grand staircase and reached the suite where Madison and her bridesmaids were getting ready. Music and laughter spilled through the door. I knocked. It was opened by one of Madison's college friends, who blinked like I was an unexpected delivery. Oh, Amber. Right. I nodded. I just wanted to check if Madison needed anything before she could respond. My mom appeared in the doorway. Amber, what are you doing here so early? I came to help, I said. Make sure everything's in place. She stepped out into the hallway, halfway closing the door behind her. Everything's fine. Madison's busy with her bridesmaids. Today needs to be perfect. Maybe check on the reception setup downstairs. Her tone was final. I nodded. Sure. As I turned to go, I heard Madison's voice from inside. Is she gone? I don't want any drama today. I walked away, pretending I hadn't heard it. I went to the reception hall. It was stunning. My work everywhere. The programs on chairs, the menus tucked into napkins, the monogrammed napkins at the bar, the massive seating chart printed on the canvas I'd mounted myself. I felt a flicker of pride. Then, just behind me, 2 staff members whispered as they adjusted table linens. The mother of the bride was super clear about the guest list. One said, yeah, she said to keep certain people away from the important guests. The other replied with a laugh. I stepped away before I could hear more. As guests began to arrive, I quietly slipped into the garden where the ceremony would take place. I sat in the very back row. No one noticed me. No one asked me to move forward. The ceremony was beautiful. Madison looked radiant in her custom gown, walking down the aisle on Mom's arm. I watched Mom cry. Happy tears. Tears I'd never seen her shed for any of my accomplishments. Afterward, as guests mingled on the terrace during cocktail hour, I hovered near the edges. I wasn't in a single photo. No one invited me to pose with the family. When it came time to enter the ballroom for the reception, guests lined up at the entrance where staff were checking names. I joined the line, rehearsing how I'd laugh off the mix-up when they couldn't find mine. My name's Amber Hayes, I told the young man holding a tablet. He typed, scrolled, frowned. Sorry, I don't see that name. There must be a mistake, I said, still smiling. I'm the bride's sister. Madison Reynolds now, I guess, he said awkwardly. Still scanning. He motioned to Vanessa, who came over. They whispered. She looked toward me and then walked over, composed but tense. There seems to be a mix-up, she said. Your name isn't on the guest list. That can't be right, I said. I designed everything. I'm the bride's sister. We appreciate your contributions, she said gently. But I can only admit guests who are on the final list approved by the bride and the mother of the bride. My mother appeared at the entrance to the ballroom, clearly summoned by the commotion. What's going on? She asked, her voice controlled but clipped. They're saying I'm not on the guest list, I said, relieved she was here to fix it. She didn't blink. Did you really think you were invited? I stared at her, my pulse roaring in my ears. Strangers aren't allowed, she added. Just loud enough for me to hear. Strangers. Mom, I'm your daughter. Madison's sister. She stepped closer, her voice low. You haven't been part of this family in a meaningful way for years. Amber, you chose that. Madison wanted her wedding to be perfect. No awkwardness. Surely, you understand. My legs felt numb. My hands went cold. But my voice was calm. Then I'll live like a stranger. I turned around. Walked out. Behind me, I heard Vanessa say, Is everything all right? My mom replied, Just a misunderstanding with a vendor. Everything's fine. Vendor. That's all I was to them. A service provider. As I stepped through the grand entrance hall, I caught a glimpse of myself in the mirror makeup. Flawless. Hair curled. Emerald dress still pristine. And yet, I felt shattered. A million pieces barely held together by pride. Outside, the sun was setting. I stood on the stone steps, suddenly aware of how much my heels hurt. I had nowhere to go. My car was in the far end of the lot. Each step throbbed, fitting, I thought, physical pain to match emotional betrayal. Halfway to my car, I broke. My knees buckled slightly. I spotted a stone bench near the fountain and collapsed onto it. I didn't cry. Not yet. Instead, memories replayed in brutal clarity. My 16th birthday, when Mom and Madison went shopping and forgot I was home alone. My graduation party when Mom told her friends Madison had struggled so much since Dad died, as if I hadn't. College move-in day when she hugged me for 10 seconds before leaving for Madison's sorority event. Holidays. My gifts opened with courtesy. Madison's with joy. Not random. Not accidental. A pattern. I was never the favorite. I was never wanted. I pulled out my phone with trembling fingers and called the one person I knew would come. Stephanie. It's me. I need you. Stephanie had been my college roommate. My rock. My best friend. 30 minutes away. What happened? Amber. What's going on? They didn't let me in, I said. I wasn't on the guest list. What? You're her sister. Apparently, that doesn't matter. I'm on my way. Stay put. As I waited, I stared at the fountain. The soft rush of water was oddly comforting. Guests walked by. Some glanced at me curious. A woman in a formal gown sitting alone by a fountain. Unmoving. 28 minutes later, Stephanie's blue Honda rolled into view. She got out and ran to me, arms open. She hugged me tight. Those monsters, she whispered. I always knew your mom was cold, but this is next-level cruelty. In her car, the tears finally came. Not graceful tears, not polite, just raw, heaving sobs that ripped from my chest. Stephanie handed me tissues and held my hand as she drove. Between breaths, I whispered. I designed everything. The invitations, the menus, the place cards, everything. I know, she said. And they used you, but this isn't a reflection of your worth. It's a reflection of their awfulness. When we got to Stephanie's apartment, I didn't even take off my shoes. She guided me into the guest room, pulled the blinds shut, and handed me a pair of sweatpants and an oversized hoodie. Change. I'll make us some tea. I peeled off the green dress and hung it up, though I knew I'd never wear it again. It felt like shedding a costume I'd been forced into my whole life, the quiet, dutiful sister, desperate for a role in a play that had already cast its stars. When I washed my face, the mascara stains on the towel felt like battle scars. I wasn't just crying for tonight. I was crying for every moment in my life. I'd been overlooked, dismissed, or made to feel less than. Check your phone. Stephanie called from the kitchen. People are probably wondering where you are. I hadn't touched it since calling her. Now, I opened it to dozens of notifications. There were photos flooding in under Madison's wedding hashtag, her radiant in her gown. Ethan smiling proudly. My designs everywhere. The menus, the programs. My hand-drawn floral borders in the background of every shot. But I was nowhere to be found. There were also texts from cousins, distant relatives. A few coworkers. Didn't see you at the wedding. Everything okay? Thought you were coming. Missed saying hi. Your stuff looked beautiful. Where were you hiding? And then a message from my mother. Your behavior was completely unacceptable. You've embarrassed the entire family. We'll discuss this after the honeymoon. My behavior. As if I'd caused a scene. As if I hadn't stood quietly outside her event. While strangers passed me by, I showed the message to Stephanie as she brought in tea. Her face darkened. Block her, she said. I can't just... You can... And you should, at least for now. I stared at the screen. My entire life had been a long audition for their approval. Could I really cut the mic? Walk off stage. She already cut you off, Stephanie said softly. You're just catching up. I blocked both my mother and Madison. Then I turned off my phone completely. The silence that followed was terrifying and freeing. That night, in Stephanie's guest bed, I didn't sleep much. I swung between numbness, grief, and white-hot rage. But woven through it all was something new. A quiet awareness. I had been performing for a family that didn't love the real me. And I was done. The week that followed was the lowest of my adult life. I called out sick from work on Monday. One day turned into 3, then 5. I stayed holed up in Stephanie's spare room, alternating between long sleeps and long nights lying awake, staring at the ceiling, haunted by every past interaction that now made sense. Stephanie brought food I barely touched. She answered calls I couldn't bear to return. She even went to my apartment to grab clean clothes and my laptop, and called my boss to explain I'd had a family emergency. The phrase felt so hollow, like a euphemism for something no one knew how to name. By Wednesday, I turned my phone back on. There were more texts from family, voicemails, some from coworkers, none from Madison. I played one voicemail from my mother, just to see, Amber, this childish behavior needs to stop. You're making a scene over nothing. Call me back immediately. Over nothing. Being excluded from my own sister's wedding, after pouring months of work into it, was nothing. I deleted the message, and the rest, unread. Then I opened Instagram. The photos kept coming, ceremony shots, candid moments, smiling faces. In one, my mother stood between Madison and Ethan, beaming under the caption, "Our perfect little family." Perfect, because I wasn't in it. I closed the app, shut off the phone again. I couldn't spiral anymore. The same question played in my head like a cruel loop. What did I do wrong? What was so flawed in me that I couldn't be loved by the people who should have loved me most?
By Friday,
Stephanie had had enough. She threw open the blinds and sat on the edge of the bed. "Get up. I can't," I mumbled, pulling the blanket over my head. She yanked it down. We're going to see a therapist today." A therapist. I blinked. "I'm not?" "Yes, you are." "And that's not an insult. This isn't just sadness. Amber, this is trauma. You need someone trained to help you through it. Not just me bringing you soup." I wanted to argue, but deep down, I knew she was right. This wasn't about one event. It was about a lifetime of trying to earn love that was never available. Rivera's office didn't feel clinical. It was warm, soft. She was a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and a no-nonsense tone that made me feel both safe and challenged. "Why are you here, Amber?" She asked after we exchanged introductions, and I told her about the wedding, the missing invitation, the programs, the voice in my head that whispered I was never enough, about Dad's death, about growing up in the shadow of Madison's spotlight, about my mother's carefully disguised cruelty. When I finished, she nodded. "What you're describing," she said, "sounds like a classic family dynamic with narcissistic patterns. Your mother likely cast Madison as the golden child and you as the scapegoat. But it's not that you did something wrong. It's the role you were assigned." I blinked. "So it's not me. I'm not just broken." "No, Amber, you were put in an impossible position. Your mother's limitations don't reflect your value. They reflect hers." The tears came fast, quiet, hot tears I couldn't hold back. "Then why does it still hurt so much?" I whispered. "If I know it wasn't my fault, why does it still feel like it was?" "Because you've internalized those beliefs since childhood. When we're young, we believe our caregiver's treatment of us is a reflection of who we are. Unlearning that takes time and intention." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. She handed me a tissue. "You're not unlovable. Amber, you've just been starved of the love you deserve." Over the next 2 weeks, I met with Dr. Rivera twice a week. I started to come back to life. Slowly, quietly. I returned to my apartment, reached out to distant friends, went back to work. Stephanie insisted on weekly dinners, and I found myself looking forward to them. One night, after a hard session, Dr. Rivera gave me homework. Look through your old family photos, not to reminisce, but to observe. Notice patterns. That evening, I opened a dusty box from under my bed. Old albums, school pictures, holiday cards. I noticed things I hadn't seen before. I was almost always on the edge of the photo, rarely in the center. When I was held, it was always by my father, rarely my mother. One Christmas picture me at 7, unwrapping a gift while Madison watched froze me. My face was pure hope, but underneath it, anxiety. I recognized it now. The constant questioning, am I doing this right? Will she love me if I do? Near the bottom of the box, I found something I'd forgotten. A letter from my dad. He'd written it when I was in 5th grade. After I won an art contest, he'd been traveling for work and couldn't be there for the ceremony. "My dearest Amber, I'm so sorry I couldn't be there today to see you accept your award. I know how hard you worked. I couldn't be prouder of you. You have a way of seeing the world that's entirely your own. Never lose that, even if others don't understand it. Being different isn't a weakness, it's your greatest strength. Love always." At it. I ran my fingers over his handwriting. For the first time in weeks, I felt a truth I could trust. He saw me. He loved what he saw. Maybe I wasn't unlovable after all. In my next therapy session, I brought the letter to Dr. Rivera. He was the only one who really accepted me. I said, after he died, "There was no one left in my family who did." She nodded, then leaned forward. "But you've built connections outside that family. Stephanie, your other friends, even me, and most importantly, you're learning to accept yourself." I hesitated. How do I even do that? I've spent my whole life chasing approval from people who clearly never intended to give it. You stop measuring your worth by their love, she said. You understand that their inability to love you well isn't about you. It's about their limits. You build a life around your truth, not their expectations. I left that session feeling like something had cracked open inside me. Not broken, just released. That night, I started researching family estrangement, narcissistic parents, scapegoat roles, emotional abuse in families that look normal on the outside. And I realized something I hadn't dared admit out loud before. I wasn't alone. There were thousands of people like me, people who'd grown up under the shadow of rejection and manipulation, who finally walked away when the pain outweighed the illusion of belonging. Some kept limited contact, others went full no contact, but all of them had reached the same clarity. It wasn't their fault. It was never about being enough. It was about surviving in a system that was never built to love them properly. The wedding wasn't the start of the story. It was the moment everything finally snapped into place. I wasn't the problem. And if I wasn't the problem, then maybe I didn't need fixing to deserve love. Maybe I just needed freedom. 3 weeks after the wedding, I was ready to take real action toward healing. Deb Rivera helped me put together a self-care routine. Morning journaling, daily walks, gentle exercise, and most surprisingly, meditation. Nothing dramatic. Just small, quiet rituals to give structure to the chaos. Back at work, something shifted in my designs. They became bolder, deeper. My creative director noticed, "There's something different in your work lately," she said during a review. "It's more honest, raw, even I like it." I smiled. I knew exactly why. For the first time, my art wasn't about making other people happy. It was about expressing what I'd been carrying for years. Pain had carved out space in me, and now beauty was growing in it. Dr. Rivera encouraged me to write a letter to my mother in Madison. Not to send right away, but to clarify my own thoughts. Set boundaries. I drafted it. Let it sit in my drafts folder for days. In the meantime, the texts kept coming. "Your sister is devastated. Stop making this about you. I raised you better than this. This silent treatment is cruel." I showed the messages to Dr. Rivera during a session. "She's flipping the narrative," she pointed out. "It's classic Darvo deny, attack, reverse victim and offender." "Exactly," I said. "I'm the villain now, for reacting to their betrayal. And how do those messages make you feel?" I paused. A month ago, they'd have wrecked me. Now, I just feel sad. Sad that she's still like this. That she'll never say, "I'm sorry I hurt you." And Dr. Rivera smiled gently. "That's progress. Amber, tremendous progress." A week later, I finalized the email. I read it once, twice, then hit send. "Mom, Madison, I'm writing to address what happened at the wedding and to establish boundaries. Being deliberately excluded after contributing my time, skills, and emotional energy made it clear how you view me and my place in this family. I need time and space to heal. Please do not contact me for at least 3 months. If I choose to reestablish communication, it will be under new terms. I will no longer accept being treated as an afterthought or an accessory. I will no longer chase love that should be given freely. This isn't about punishment. It's about preservation. I deserve better, and I'm ready to insist on it. Amber." I turned off my phone and walked to the Boston Public Garden. It was a crisp, windy morning, and the air felt cleaner than it had in weeks. When I came back, I checked my phone. As expected, multiple missed calls. 1 from Madison, 4 from my mother. The texts that followed were textbook. "Way to make everything about you. I don't know what fantasy you've constructed, but this is outrageous. If your father could see this, he'd be heartbroken." I didn't reply. I blocked them both again. This time, it felt permanent. The following weeks were surprisingly peaceful. Without the drain of toxic emotional labor, I had more energy to give to the people who actually wanted me around. I joined a local art collective, volunteered teaching graphic design at a community center, caught up with college friends I hadn't spoken to in years. One rainy Tuesday, I went to a coffee shop to sketch. While waiting in line, I dropped my notebook. A guy behind me picked it up. "These are beautiful," he said, flipping through logo concepts. "Are you a designer?" "Yeah, I am." His name was Jason, a freelance photographer, interior and architectural work mostly. We ended up sharing a table, talking for over an hour about clients, art, and how annoying it is when people say, "Can you just Photoshop that in?" Before we left, he smiled and asked, "Would you want to get coffee again sometime? Or dinner?" I said yes. Walking home, I realized he might have been flirting. And instead of panicking, I smiled. Maybe I wasn't ready, but I was willing. We started seeing each other slowly, carefully. Sometimes for creative collaboration, sometimes for dinner, sometimes just to walk along the Charles River and talk about art and families and weird clients. Jason was kind in ways I didn't know how to receive at first. When he said he'd call, he called when he liked something about me. He said it plainly. "I like how your mind works. He told me one night, "You see connections other people miss. There were no hoops to jump through, no approval to earn." He liked me. Just me. And I realized I had no idea how much I needed that. I also made a big decision. To move. I found a new apartment in Jamaica Plain, a little farther from work, but in a neighborhood filled with artists, students, and people who didn't know my mother. Packing up my old place felt like more than a move. It felt like an exorcism. Every drawer I emptied, every box I sealed was a chance to say, "This gets to stay." That doesn't come with me. I decorated the new apartment slowly, intentionally. Soft sage green walls, local art, candles that smelled like rain, a tiny home office that doubled as a creative studio. It didn't look like much from the outside, but it was mine, and it felt like peace. 3 months passed, then 4. The holiday season rolled around. Normally, I'd be bracing for awkward family obligations and emotional landmines. This year, I received one email from my mother, no greeting, no warmth, just Thanksgiving dinner will be at 3 p.m. Madison and Ethan will be there. I expect you to put this nonsense behind you and behave like an adult. Family is family. I sat with the message for a long time. Then I replied, "Thank you for the invitation. I won't be attending Thanksgiving this year. I wish you a pleasant holiday." No explanations. No softening. Just a boundary. Instead of family dinner, I accepted Stephanie's invitation to a Friendsgiving. Jason came, too. His first time meeting some of my closest friends. We made too much food, played chaotic board games, and laughed until we couldn't breathe. Not once did I feel small. Not once did I feel like I was fighting for a seat at the table. Later that evening, Stephanie pulled me aside. "How are you really doing?" I paused. "I'm doing authentically," I said. "Sometimes I'm still angry. Sometimes I'm sad. But I'm also free. I'm not pretending anymore. This is real." She hugged me tight. That's all any of us can hope for. Looking back, that wedding rejection, the moment that shattered me, ended up being the beginning of everything. Of boundaries, of honesty, of selfhood. I stopped trying to force myself into a family mold that never fit me. And in doing so, I created space for people who actually valued me. I launched my own boutique design studio that winter, left the agency and started working directly with small creative businesses. My work felt more aligned with who I was than ever before. Every logo I made, every brand guide I built, every hand-drawn detail, it all reflected a new truth. I no longer needed to prove my worth to anyone who refused to see it. My relationship with Jason grew deeper, steadier. My apartment, once a sanctuary, became a space for connection. Dinners with friends, quiet mornings, even art nights with teens from the community center. I still saw Dr. River once a month, mostly to check in. We no longer focused on crisis recovery. We talked about long-term healing, identity, future plans. She called it building an internal validation system. Instead of asking, "What would mom think?" I started asking, "What do I think?" It was a revolution. Then, 13 months after the wedding, Madison called. I hadn't heard from her in almost a year. Just a couple of polite email exchanges around birthdays. Nothing personal. Seeing her name on my phone gave me a weird jolt, but not fear. Just curiosity? I answered. "Hello. Madison." "Amber," she said. Her voice cracked slightly. I need to talk to you. I'm listening." And then it all came out. Her perfect marriage. Falling apart. Ethan was never home. Her mother-in-law had begun subtly undermining her. My mom was pressuring her to have a baby, saying things like, "Successful men are busy. You should be grateful." "I just feel invisible," Madison said, her voice breaking. And for the first time in her life, I think she truly did. "I thought about your email," she added. "The one you sent last year, about not being an afterthought, about deserving more. I didn't get it then. Maybe I do now." 1,000 emotions rushed in. Part of me wanted to lash out. "Now you understand." Part of me wanted to hang up. But instead, I listened, because that's what I needed. Once. It's never too late to recognize your worth, I told her. We talked for almost an hour, carefully. Honestly, it wasn't a magical healing moment. It was awkward, but it was real. She asked if we could meet for coffee. I agreed with boundaries. A public cafe, neutral ground. When we met, we stuck to light topics. Her work, my new business, memories of Dad. There was no grand apology, but there was effort. As we were leaving, she asked, "Mom's expecting everyone for Thanksgiving. Would you consider coming?" I didn't hesitate. "I appreciate the invitation," I said, "but I'm hosting my own this year. You and Ethan are welcome to join us. If you'd like to try something different." Her eyebrows rose. "You're hosting?" "Yeah. It won't be as formal as Mom's. But the food will be good, and the company will be kind." She didn't accept the offer, but she didn't mock it either. Just said, "Thanks,"
and hugged me before walking away.
Later, I got a bottle of wine in the mail. No card, but I knew it was from her. My mother. Of course, had her own spin. She sent a lengthy email after hearing we'd met. "I'm glad you girls are putting this nonsense behind you. I always knew you'd come around eventually, once you were ready to be mature. Old Amber would have obsessed over every sentence, looking for hidden meanings, secret signs of approval. New Amber. I replied simply. I'm glad Madison and I had a chance to reconnect. I hope you're well. Jason noticed the difference. You used to get anxious whenever your mom contacted you. He said one evening while we cooked dinner. Now, you're calm. Not calm. Clear, I said. I finally see her for who she is, and I don't need her to change for me to be okay. He smiled. That's big. I used to apologize just for having an opinion, I said, laughing. Now I host Thanksgiving. That Thanksgiving. It was beautiful chaos. Jason, Stephanie, her boyfriend, friends from the art collective, a couple of neighbors, even an old college professor dropped by for pie. Too many cooks in the kitchen. Wine spilled. Arguments about which Die Hard movie is the best. It's the first, obviously. Someone brought a homemade cranberry sauce that no one touched, but we all complimented anyway. Looking around that crowded apartment, I realized this was family. Not because of blood, but because of choice. People who saw me, valued me, loved me without asking me to shrink. One December night, I got a message from a cousin I hadn't spoken to since the wedding. She was in town for a conference and wanted to meet for coffee. When we sat down, she looked at me for a long moment before saying, I heard what happened at the wedding. Aunt Diana told everyone you had a scheduling conflict, but I figured that wasn't the whole story. I smiled. No, it wasn't. You seem better than I remember you at family gatherings. I said simply. And I meant it. This past year, I've learned the hardest truth of all. Sometimes the people we're born to don't know how to love us. And it's not our job to teach them. It's our job to love ourselves. To build lives that honor our truth. To walk away from conditional love so we can finally find the kind that's real. If you've ever had to walk away from a relationship that hurt you, especially when society tells you, but they're family, I want to hear your story. Drop it in the comments. You're not alone. If my story resonated with you, hit that like button. Subscribe for more content about healing, boundaries, and becoming the person you were always meant to be. And remember, sometimes the family you build is more powerful than the one you're born into. And sometimes walking away isn't giving up, it's coming home to yourself. Thanks for listening to mine.